Our next speaker is Anthony Marshall. And I know you appreciated where we started. This is going to go another level deeper for you here. Anthony is Senior Research Director of Business Thought Leadership at the IBM Institute for Business Value, IBV. He leads the company's top-rated thought leadership program. He leads a global team of 60 technology and industry experts, statisticians, economists, and analysts on original thought leadership in innovation, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, cloud, and diversity. Prior to joining the IBV, Anthony spent more than 10 years in strategic consulting and began his career in public policy, working on microeconomic reform, deregulation, and privatization of major utility industries and infrastructure. So I think you're going to find this interesting. I bet there's going to be some interesting legal questions that come to you, Anthony. We look forward to hearing your insights on the impact of generative AI on our business. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and particularly following that excellent presentation. We're going to have a little bit of a different tack here, because I'm going to bring some data to bear in some surveying that we've done, particularly in the last 6 months or so, to what executives are seeing in terms of their impressions of what's happening with generative AI, how they're applying it to their business, for some of the challenges. I'm going to ask you some questions and then have your answers so you can compare them with what executives are saying. We do a lot of surveying of CEOs and other executives that are important in your business, I'm sure. And I tried to bring some marketing specific content in here as well. I think you'll find some of the data around marketing particularly interesting. Also, as part of a new series that we're launching every 2 weeks called the CEO's Guide to Generative AI. It's we identify 3 things that CEOs need to know and three things that CEOs need to do around multiple topics around generative AI. We've produced 6 of these so far. There are 13 in total that we're going to publish by the end of the year, and marketing is coming up at the beginning of December. And so I don't have any data back on the marketing content yet, but I can show you some of the things that we're going to be researching and show you where to find that content when it's first available. Just to start, I had a polling question that we've already answered, which is about 80% of you have used something around generative AI in your everyday life. But in terms of your professional life, in terms of the work that you do in your business each day, who in the room here has used one? That's great. So what, 50%? But substantially less, which is very interesting. And so that's the sort of data we're coming up with in the surveying that we're doing as well. We're also seeing a big delta between aspiration and vision of chief executives, for example, and the reality on the ground of some of the other roles in the C-suite, which is very interesting. I'll reflect on a little bit later. Okay, so we talked about the IBM Institute for Business Value. It's been around for about 20 years. It is IBM's thought leadership practice or program. We're sort of semi-independent from the business. We don't sell or engage in sales of anything that IBM does. It is original thought leadership. We rely very heavily on data. And so we spend a lot of our time out there surveying consumers, employees, organizations, and different roles across, really around the world, in order to produce probably 100 pieces of thought leadership content every year, of which 30 or so are really deep studies. And so we also have different techniques. We do very large surveys that take a long time. And we also do pulsing, and that's really what we've been doing in relation to generative AI this year. So we actually have surveys in the field constantly, and that's allowed us to actually even track different attitudes and different decisions that executives are making through time. And indeed, one of the CEO action guides that we released yesterday was on tech spend, around how are organizations, what sort of investments are they making, how they plan to pay and fund generative AI investments, given that a lot of this is happening in real time and budgets happen on an annual basis. And we've found just in the last 3 months that the amount of budget that executives are allocating to generative AI has increased almost 4-fold. It's coming off a small base, but it's increasing dramatically. So a lot of this stuff is unexpected and having to be happening in real time. We tend to research across 5 major areas. So we have a C-suite program where we have a CEO study, a CIO study. We have done CMO studies in the past, and we release these annually. Not all of them annually. We try and do CEO every year, but this program's been going on for about 18 years. And so we have this wonderful data series that goes back to the early 2000s that gives us enormous insight and ability to do lots of longitudinal analysis. We also focus on technology, as you might expect, being part of IBM. And so we focus on cloud, we focus on AI, and we've been doing so for almost a decade now. I'll show you a little bit of that shortly. Quantum computing and other technologies that IBM is involved with and play an important part of our client base, which is, we are a B2B company, in effect. Got out of the B2C space more than a decade ago when we sold the computer laptop division to Lenovo and some other sales. We have industry leaders researching each of the major industries. And so I've got a banking and financial markets leader. I've got a telecoms leader doing research all the time. And increasingly, particularly in the last year and a half, as IBM has engaged in a broader ecosystem approach, we've been collaborating deeply with a lot of industry associations. And so the Mobile World Congress, for example, is in Las Vegas this week, and we're publishing 2 studies there in collaboration with GSMA, thank you. GSMA, which is the peak organization that runs Mobile World Congress, and we're co-branding with them and other organizations in different industries. And we also do research around specific functional areas. So I've got a supply chain leader, got an experience and marketing leader doing research all the time. And diversity and sustainability. This was a big program that we built during COVID, and that was very important. We did a lot of co-publishing, co-branding with some of the community organizations as well. In terms of the readership, we've done some actual double-blind surveying around how thought leadership is consumed and who consumes thought leadership. We've worked with our partner organization, Oxford Economics, in this, so no one knew that IBM was involved. Because it's double-blind, we don't know specifically which executives were surveyed, but around the world, we surveyed 3,500 C-suite executives, including around 50% of those were CEOs. And we found that on average, 88% of chief executive officers consume thought leadership. And that's a very consistent trend around the world. And also on average, they consume thought leadership to approximately 2 hours each week. They consume thought leadership of around 5 organizations. So they don't, it's not a broad note. They have their organizations and they keep on consuming thought leadership regularly of those organizations. And we're number 3. So interestingly, in some markets where IBM doesn't even have a huge footprint, we're number 1. But in the US, McKinsey is number 1, BCG is number 2, and among CEOs, we're in about 3 points away from McKinsey. So because of the trust that the IBM organization has that we're leveraging off in the content that we have, the independence that we have from the organization in terms of thought leadership, the content's consumed quite regularly. So before we go on, and this sort of complements some of the stuff that Chris was talking about, I just thought it would be interesting just looking at the landscape of evolution of AI and how we got here. And so, some of these things IBM was involved with Deep Blue, the IBM Watson, and then transformer technology, which allowed self-learning, which really is the thing that changed the nexus of why this is all happening right now. ChatGPT coming out, and then we've got very rapid advancement across product lines in the software space, at least, of generative AI. And from an IBM perspective, IBM's in there, it has its own sort of AI technology in Watson. But the thing that IBM is doing that a lot of these other organizations aren't, is that we're trying to help connect it all together. So connect the data together, connect the AI together, hybrid cloud. There was an acquisition that we did of Red Hat organization, which provided a lot of the infrastructure, the interoperability. And so our B2B clients are trying to bring all this together, learn how to do it. A lot of our clients are in highly regulated industries. And so, the risk-taking, the sort of cowboy approach, you cannot apply in these industries. You're going to break so many laws. And so a lot of this stuff in the governance around, and we'll talk about some of that as we go through. All right, so I mentioned that we've been, and please, if you've got questions, just jump in. I mentioned that we've been working on AI specifically in thought leadership for quite a long time. And we actually started, and the way I started with the IBM Institute for Business Value is I was consulting in banking and financial markets for about 10 years. Between you and me, I was really tired of that and was deciding to leave the organization. And I had a conversation with an executive who said, don't leave, I will do something nice for you at some point. And a year later, I got a call and I was told to report to head office just after I rolled off a project with a bank. And I was told, okay, there's this thing that's been created that you won't know anything about, but it's about to be put in front of an audience on TV to play Jeopardy. It's an AI. And you need to facilitate all of the communications and channels and do all that. So I was sort of asked to lead this project internally to sort of facilitate all this and to orchestrate all this stuff, which was the number of mails I got on a day went from 100 to about 2,000, and so it was really a fire hose. But that was a very interesting thing with IBM sort of with Watson winning in the Jeopardy competition, although if you recall back, it got some really simple things wrong, like saying that a city that was supposed to be in the United States was Toronto and stuff like that. So there were some of the early issues with AI. And joined the IBM Institute of Business Value following that. And just within a couple of years, we started our thought leadership around AI specifically. And again, this is all based on data. So we really don't produce anything that is based on survey data and that's proprietary. And so we've been investigating the AI space for all this time. We started off with calling it cognitive computing in the sort of the IBM lexicon. How do organizations adopt AI? And then we went to say, okay, well, what sort of areas, what industries, what function should you be focusing on? What are the benefits? What are the use cases? What value are you getting out of AI? And then sort of into the ethics around AI. So we've put several studies out around AI ethics, and IBM is actually part of an ethics board. One of these publications was done in collaboration with the World Economic Forum, and this is an example of one of the C-suite series. This is a CEO study that was really around trust in AI. Okay, then sort of even going deeper, and then looking at the research that we did or are doing in progress around generative AI. So at the end of last year, we'd been publishing a bunch of AI thought leadership, talking about foundation models and really using that sort of nomenclature, that language, and then sort of generative AI hit, and we decided, okay, we've got to accelerate, we've got to become more relevant, and so that's when we really started our pulsing thing, so that we could start producing a study with. Let me just jump here for a second. Let me just jump here. Contextually. Yeah, here we go. The CEO study for this year, we really majored on generative AI. And so we did some polling, some surveying. This originally had 3,000 CEOs. We formulated the survey last year. We added a bunch of additional CEOs in a pulse and made it all around generative AI. And so, and this is one of the interesting data points that we found in terms of this dichotomy. In terms of the aspiration of CEOs and the reality on the ground sometimes, where 74% of CEOs in this survey said that they already have the right skills, they're ready to go, just bring it in, we're good to go. And in terms of the rest of the C-suite, they were saying, no, it's not as simple as that. That led to us thinking, okay, this is a real challenge. And it had pretty good uptake. And we were asked by our leadership, okay, that's great. You need to now produce a new report every 2 weeks for the rest of the year, which is how we started publishing our series of CEO action guides. So we've focused on areas that we've already talked about today. So the first one was around talent and skills. The second one was around customer service. The third one was around application modernization. The fourth one was around experience. The fifth round, I'm going to forget at some point. The fifth one was around platforms and ecosystems, and the one yesterday was around tech spend. And we're going through. We're doing one on sustainability. We're doing one on open innovation. We're doing one on marketing. We're doing one on supply chain, etc. And what we're trying to do in these things is to draw out things that are not obvious. And so in application modernization, we talked about with Chris some of the benefits of generative AI in application modernization. If you're a highly regulated bank that's been around for a long time, a lot of your systems are in COBOL, for example. And any programmers of COBOL are either retired or it's really, really hard. But generative AI can solve some of these problems. So one of the benefits of generative AI, not just improving the ability to code, making it faster, making it more reliable, and even as recently as 4 or 5 years ago, people that were reskilling were told, okay, you can code, you should become a coder. Now that's being disintermediated by this technology. One of the benefits of generative AI is that it actually changes the equation for transformation. Because if you're actually able to rewrite code more efficiently and faster and at scale, then the ability, a lot of the impediments to transform your enterprise are being reduced. And so a lot of our discussion in the application modernization, generative AI action guide, for example, was not just about the benefits to code, but thinking through what are the benefits of being able to do code better, faster, and more scalable to the enterprise in terms of being able to accelerate the transformation, basically your digital transformation. So just going back, we've done around 20 pulse surveys around different topics so far this year. And these are pulses of at least a couple of hundred executives, whether they're CEOs or a mix of executives around various topics. And we've covered all sorts of different topics: ROI, risks, challenges, etc. Here are some other topics as well. So, and in terms of some of the roles that we've covered, there are a whole selection from chief innovation officers to CMOs. The survey that we're doing right now to motivate the marketing action guide is of 200 CMOs in North America, typically of large organizations. So if you get a call from Oxford Economics, it's supposed to be double blind, but it's probably us having motivated that. Okay, so what's some of the early data that we've found? Some of the things we've found already. So CEOs are deploying generative AI across their organizations. They are saying, yeah, we're doing it one form or another. Now we know, Chris, I'm sure in your own experience, that many organizations are incorporating generative AI pretty rapidly into their product suite. So Adobe, Salesforce, et cetera. Whether this is actually bespoke applications of generative AI or that CEOs are recognizing that a lot of the tools, the productivity tools, et cetera, are incorporating generative AI, not sure, but they believe that they are applying it. Why are they applying it? Well, it improves actionability, it improves speed, and improves quality, as Chris was saying. This is sort of confirming a lot of the stuff that Chris was talking about in terms of data. All right, so one of the other studies that we produced, actually the first one that we really produced after the CEO study, it was really only, it feels like it's going very, very quickly. This only came out about 2.5 months ago, and it already feels like 2 years ago. There's some of the things that we found in terms of a lot of the data is confirming what we anticipate. So what can generative AI do right now? What can't it do right now? So, and Chris covered some of this, summarization and classification. And so this is some of the priorities of executives that we found. So images and graphics, interestingly, came up as number one. That was unexpected. I would have thought text. Text came up, the code came up very strongly as well. Statistically, these are basically interchangeable, but very strong focus. They're basically improving the quality of the content and providing conceptual answers. So 90% of executives are planning to use generative AI to educate their team. So in terms of this talent and skills piece, you've got the challenge of generative AI threatening potentially some specific tasks. And Chris was completely correct in what he was saying. And this is something that we're looking at from the BPO side. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any ability for you to audit? I mean, they're telling you, yes, we're using generative AI. Is there any way for you to verify that, since there's so much misunderstanding of what it is?
No, typically within a survey that you've got limited time, it's difficult. What we're doing is that we're actually collating all of this stuff into a hardcover book that we're going to publish at the end of the year and actually launch at the World Economic Forum in January. And we're complementing the action guides with deep CEO interviews. And so we're about, we've got 13 topics. I think we're just finishing our 10th CEO interview, and that will allow this sort of exploration of more concepts, but that really needs to be anecdotal. Yeah, it's very hard to cover in a survey context. And so you're absolutely right. It's getting greater clarity is important. What it can't do right now, and the executives are pretty clear on this as well. Basically they're identifying accuracy concerns, explainability, all of the things that we've been talking about earlier today, and ethical integrity, and I'll investigate that a little bit further shortly. Okay, so I mentioned that we were looking at ROI. We've been tracking this, as I said, for a long time, and this is the ROI of AI investments, and more recently generative AI investments. Okay, so what do we've seen some of the challenges. What do executives say that they need in terms of the data, the use of data, the use of analysis? Well, they need predictability, consistency, integrity, reliability, and very importantly, security. Right? All of these things are critical. And as Chris mentioned, generative AI struggles with a lot of this stuff. Explainability. When Chris was talking about links not being there, it's not just that links aren't there tracing where the content came from. It's difficult often to actually determine in this massive data that's being incorporated where different inferences come from, right? And so if you're having to explain, even in the context of a legal case on copyright, for example, where something was derived, having explainability is very important. This bias question is critical. The ethics around it are very, very critical, as well as this consistency, integrity, reliability, and security. All of these things come through strongly, and I've got some more data that I can share with you a little bit later on this. In terms of ROI, we found with AI, and although there was an acceleration in AI in COVID during that 2.5 years, as you would know, and so for some industries, some organizations, they lost their market. Other organizations, it became incredibly intense, and so the ability to scale call centers, et cetera, was incredibly difficult when no one was turning up to the office either. All right, so this crisis of need in some areas coincided with an inability to even get people into the office. How do you solve that problem? Well, you solve it through AI. So there were a lot of people that regretted, a lot of executives that regretted the fact that they hadn't invested more heavily in AI to support scalability and speed and responsiveness, particularly for something like call center earlier on. And you saw sort of this uptick because there was more interest, more activity around it. But progressively, the ROI of this, so this is the experienced, not anticipated, this is the experienced ROI of AI investments been going up, and generative AI is really building on that base. And so we're seeing very, pretty robust estimates and expectations around ROI of generative AI very quickly. One of the things that we're also seeing, which I haven't shared here because it's new information that's come in since I wrote this, is when we asked executives to evaluate the relative ROI of different types of investments in generative AI, they are not seeing any distinction. So just sort of incorporating ChatGPT in some part of their process, for example, is equivalent for them in terms of ROI as building a completely bespoke model, building your own foundation model and sort of doing something that's completely bespoke. And so they're seeing equivalency, which suggests that they don't really understand fully what all this stuff is, all right? And so this is still a very moving target. I was actually the point that I was making earlier in terms of BPO and specific activities is a good example. the BPO organization of IBM has sort of come to us and says, okay, can you help us sort of decompose, do some thought leadership around decomposition of specific processes? And when you're thinking about a particular activity, a series of activities that comprise a process, whether it's in, well, it could be call center, it could be HR, could be service, could be anything. Basically, decomposing the various specific activities that an individual does each day or as part of an action. And basically, what we're seeing is that at least over the short term, the technology is not coming in to replace the individual in totality, but sort of making specific activities easier for them to do, or more scalable, or faster to do, more accurate. And so you've got in HR, for example, if you get an HR inquiry, it might be that it's fielded by an individual or routed by a technology, but an individual intercedes and has to make a decision based on an assessment of probabilities that the AI provides that individual. And so this is, and when you come to something like experience, this becomes even more important, because one of the other points that Chris made is that you've got to be very careful if you're having the AI do directly with your customers. But if you're going through an interface of a human being, then the AI really is engaging with the human being, not directly with the customer. What does that say about the human being and the skills that they're going to need? When you've got some of these activities that historically have not been seen as being necessarily high skill activities are now incredibly high skill activities, because the decision making, the nuance, the sensitivity, the empathy that are involved in sort of navigating some of these decisions are incredibly high value. And so you could see a real change in the perception of some of the roles that were historically not seen as particularly high skill roles, that are going to become very high skill roles. Scalability may improve dramatically, but the human elements can be there as well. All right, so here's a polling question for you. And so, what is the biggest benefit from generative AI in your opinion? And I'll just ask, have a read through, and I'll ask people to raise their hands as I read through afterwards. But the reducing headcount, improving customer acquisition, improving decision making, improving revenue, scaling employee expertise, competitive advantage, and improving quality of content. So who would say reducing headcount? No one? Okay, interesting. Improving customer acquisition. What? Improving decision making. Yeah, quite a few. Improving revenue. Yeah. Scaling employee expertise. Competitive advantage. Improving quality of content. Yep. All right, so this is what we found. Improving quality of content was number one, interestingly. But what we also found in the fear of AI replacing jobs, and what we're finding in terms of the intention of executives in their application of AI is completely divergent. These ones about reducing costs, reducing headcount, are really at the very bottom of what executives selected. These things about building capabilities and driving growth are extremely high, whether they're about growth directly or expanding the capabilities of scaling expertise, improving quality, very, very high. And so really, when executives, sort of C-suite executives, are making the call about where to invest and why to invest in generative AI, it's really a growth play. It's a growth and capability play. And so a lot of the press, the fear that sort of encouraged sometimes in the press about this technology coming and taking away people's jobs and doing this and doing that, it really isn't reflected in the data that we're seeing. Quite the reverse. It's all around competitiveness. Okay, so let's just deepen our knowledge. And this is a little bit complex, this chart, but I'll work through it with you. So we asked a couple of different questions. So we said, okay, with generative AI, in terms of the specific activities, are you looking to automate activities, or are you looking to augment or elevate activities? And we went through, I think, 13 functions, from procurement to marketing. Interestingly, in terms of automation, and remember, these initial iterations of generative AI are all around content and language. So it's no surprise that a content-heavy capability, a function, is one of the top ones, right? It's something that's immediately understandable. One of the things that generative AI is not doing, and some of the people that I collaborate with sometimes are trying to do, is add numeracy to the generative AI capability, and that's going to change. If that is successful, which I'm sure in due course it will, that's going to change the ability to do analysis and other things dramatically. But marketing, so 27%, and this is not percentage of basically activities. This is the percentage of executives indicating this, but 27% of executives saying, yes, I'm looking to automate marketing functions, and then the other 73 said, no, it's really augmentation and elevation. These are people that actually selected those functional areas. Service is very important. Human resources, again, this is one of the early applications. This is the average in that sort of procurement. And this is interesting because I would have imagined this, a lot of this stuff could be automated. In terms of the proportion of the workforce that is impacted, we asked that as well. And we asked the executives to say, okay, what proportion of the workforce in each of these functional areas are going to be impacted directly in some way, whether it's augmented or whether some of their activities are going to be automated in 2023, but also 2025. In marketing, really right now, they're saying, well, about 10% of my workforce, right, this year is going to have some sort of augmentation. Generative AI will touch them in some way. And then 2025, only 13%, which really still isn't very much. I suspect this is going to be much higher. They're still sort of grappling with some of the opportunities, but it really depends on how fast generative AI becomes more, is scalable and applicable, and some of the challenges are being diminished. The top one was, where is it? Around this 12% in terms of 2023 for manufacturing and sales and customer service, but then going up to 15% is in service. So in the action guide that we did around customer service, it became very, we really focused on, in the service area, is the AI dealing directly with customers, or is the AI dealing with someone doing call center or someone that's sort of being the intermediary between the customer and the technology, and the importance of that. All right, here's another point. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yep.
I think of AI as a very kind of large idea that can impact a lot of different areas in the organization. Like we use AI sometimes to say things like trucking network, manufacturing, but I wouldn't necessarily think of those as generative AI.
Yeah.
Can you define what is generative AI?
So generative is basically self-trained. And so this is some of the thing that was holding AI back from really becoming scalable, because the intensity of having to train the AI was challenging. But when the transformer technology came into it, was self-training was a possibility, and that sort of led to all of this stuff. So that really is the distinguishing feature, that you don't have to have this human intervention very intensively at the beginning to actually train up the AI. And right from the early days of Watson, the reason why it took so long to get Watson ready for Jeopardy, and you had a team of people trying to train Watson to win a game show, right? That was the objective. And then there are other applications, and it took a long time to sort of train it up. Yeah.
Move your mic a little higher.
Sure. I'm sorry. Okay, so here's another question. So what skill will become the most important in your organization due to generative AI? So ethics and integrity, software development and coding, time management, innovation, teaming and collaboration, technology skills, or creativity. So which one in your organization, in your estimation, do you think is going to become the most important skill as a consequence of broader use of generative AI? Okay, who says ethics and integrity? Software development and coding.
Just for the audience.
Okay, for the audience, 0, 0, 0. Time management. Yep, so that's probably 5%. Innovation, probably 20%, 25%. Teaming and collaboration, probably 8%. Technology skills, 2%. Creativity, that's about, what, 20%? We found creativity, interestingly. So, again, creativity, and, we're talking, Chris was talking about this in terms of, basically, in terms of, programming the AI. But across the board, these skills around the soft skill, creativity, incredibly important. One of the things that we're going to be focusing on next year in our research after we get through producing all of these action guides on various topics is really doubling down on investigating and exploring the importance of generative AI on innovation, and creativity is the central part of that. And so, basically, creativity is seen as being incredibly important skill as a consequence of generative AI. And again, this goes to the capability point, because the executives that we're surveying recognize that the generative AI is really building capabilities, changing the capability sort of nexus in an organization. And so creativity is critically important. Technology skills, which I initially thought would be very high, much higher, less so. And you can understand that if generative AI in coding is addressing some of the lack of some technology skills. Although we're seeing crazy salaries being offered for individuals that have skills, and specifically in generative AI right now. Time management going down to there are a couple I didn't include at the bottom, agility and ethics and integrity. So again, being creativity, it's all around expanding innovation, expanding revenue, really doing different things with the enterprise. And my last polling question is, which is the biggest risk that you think will confront your organization as a consequence of more general application of generative AI? So the first one is tricking or manipulating people. Is that the biggest risk? Untrustworthy source data, damaging brand perceptions, questionable ethics, answers can't be explained, it introduces new vulnerabilities, or it increases legal liability. So which do you think is the single most important risk or most threatening risk in your organization as a consequence of generative AI? Who says tricking or manipulating people? No one? Untrustworthy source data. It's probably, that's 30%. Damaging brand perceptions. I thought this was a room full of marketing people. Yeah. So that was about 2%. Questionable ethics. 5%. Answers can't be explained. 3%. Introducing new vulnerabilities. Probably 8% and 10%. And increasing legal liability. Okay, that's about 7 or 8%. Increasing legal liability, and I realized after putting these slides together that every number one I put as the last one. So you probably, if you go back, you would have realized that. But increasing legal liability, number one. What we call operationalization. Introducing new vulnerabilities. This is very, very important. So the security implications are really massive. We're just seeing an acceleration of security challenges in the space of generative AI. Also, IBM is a leader in quantum computing technology. One of the things that we are investigating, we have a writing around is a thing called quantum safe, and basically making security quantum proof, as nefarious actors, if they get access or develop quantum technology, security vulnerabilities are exposed dramatically. But generative AI as well creates all sorts of new challenges. Answers not identified, basically data sources, still very high. So all of this stuff's very, very high that everyone basically selected. But legal liability and the issues around that is really seen as great concern. Yeah, go ahead.
Would you say that the biggest risk of not doing AI?
Well, what is the biggest risk of not sort of applying generative AI to your organization? So certainly competitiveness. If you're in a protected industry, if you're a protected firm, if you're a monopoly, you've got the luxury of not adopting technology. Ultimately, it catches up with you sooner or later. But certainly, if you're in a competitive industry, then this is going to be changing the economics and capabilities of that industry. And if and when done well, it will become very clear. And so, presumably, whoever is able to do that will have a massive advantage. But it's just not the direct advantage of introducing generative AI to your customer service, to other aspects of it. One of the things that we really try to explore in some of the action guides is that it changes the equation of organizational change as well. And so, if you've got if you're making it easier to advance digital transformation within your organization that would have struggled massively with digital transformation, then that is a huge opportunity and one that's probably not very well recognized right now. Any other questions? Okay, so what is the model? And so one of the things I mentioned at the beginning is this term hybrid. And so several years ago, IBM sort of doubled down on hybrid cloud with its acquisition of a company called Red Hat that really focused on interoperability and basically connecting stuff together, making it easier to put things together. And really, in terms of generative AI, it's that solution as well. You've got the issue of prompt data and other content being saved. If you're basically putting stuff into ChatGPT, then it is using the fact that you're querying in the way that you're querying, it is using the data that you're putting in there, and it is absorbing that into the corpus, right? And one of the things that, as an employee of IBM Corporation, I was told 6 months ago, you are not allowed to use ChatGPT. I am not allowed to use ChatGPT, right? In its open source manner, but in a hybrid way. So I can actually access it internally within IBM because of sort of a model that or interface that IBM put together that allows us to access it without saving prompt data, without allowing to save any additional data that we put into it. And so we're not, it's not capturing any of the benefits of what we're doing to the model. We're getting the benefits from the model. And so inevitably, the solution for a lot of organizations is going to be a hybrid approach, where you have the ability to access some of the large language models without leaving fingerprints, without leaving a footprint, while getting the benefits of it, and they are substantial. You probably have something where you've got sort of smaller models. I've just called them medium language models for the purpose of comparison in your ecosystem. So whether that's with your vendors or whether it's with other partners in an ecosystem, and then you'll probably have a closed environment that is completely proprietary, where you've got language models that are directly your language models. It's going to sort of be a bespoke approach. And certainly that's going to be somewhat costly and depending on the size of the organization. But what will probably be, and from a user perspective, this will be relatively seamless, although you'll be able to probably choose which language model you access when you make an inquiry. But basically, you'll probably be able to access any of these, but each of them will have different governance, different rules around how data is being ingested, how prompt information is being used or saved, and what the governance is around all of that. But that's where we're getting to, I suspect, and that's sort of the play that IBM's making in terms of basically creating all of the infrastructure to bring this together to make it possible. Because if you think about this, in order for this to work, you need to access this. You need to be able to access internal data very easily, plus data and systems across your ecosystem. And you need to have interoperability all through your organization to be able to access that. Then you need to bring it all together, and you need to do it in a seamless way to make it really easy to use. And so the technology behind that really relies on this interoperability to drive this hybrid approach. And that's sort of we think the model that's going to be pretty pervasive in the next couple of years. So the dev was always in the detail with these sorts of things. What we're going to need in order to make this successful is strong data governance, robust infrastructure. You need all of this interoperability and connectivity that's managed, and of course the skills, and we've talked about that a little bit in terms of the skills that are going to change, the skills that are going to be built, the skills that are going to be augmented. So this is the series that I mentioned that we've been producing, and these are around 2,000 words. If you're interested in any of this stuff, you just go to the website. Very easy. It's where is it? IBM.com/IBV. So IBM.com/IBV for the Institute for Business Value. All of this stuff, everything we produce is free. All of this stuff is on the web, completely accessible just by scrolling on the web. And so far, we've produced the first action guide, which was around talent and skills, where creativity was the must-have generative AI skill, which we explored. We then published the action guide around customer service. So 3 things that a CEO absolutely needs to know, the 3 things that a CEO absolutely needs to do. We've done the customer service is leapfrogged other functions to become a #1 generative AI priority. And then we did application modernization, I've mentioned. So generative AI presents an opportunity for business to retire their technical debt once and for all, because it's not just speeding and making application application programming, basically app development easier to do and more scalable. It's the implications of that for the enterprise. Then customer employee experience. So organization needs to basically create ethical journeys to build customer confidence. So one of the things I was we were talking about this morning was basically identifying if you're dealing with an AI or a person and making that clear. So these are some of the things you need to embed in this sort of experience design element. And then platforms, data, and governance. And so one of the things, interestingly, that we focused on this one is for years, CEOs particularly were sort of saying, I want to become a platform. I want my business to become a platform. We need to be a platform. Platforms where all the money is. Such great examples of platforms. There's Uber's out there. There's Google's out there. There's da-da-da-da. Let's be a platform. And a lot of organizations really failed because the economics of platform weren't there. The point that we're making here is that generative AI is disrupting the disruptors, because it basically provides another opportunity for new types of business models, and it really adds another, basically another opportunity, another bite of the cherry, if you will. And so if you failed the first time to create a platform business model, this could provide you a second opportunity of doing so. So that's a compelling thing. And then tech spend. How do you spend it? How do you, what investment is required? How do you fund it is being in there. And then, as I mentioned, on the 5th of December, we're launching the CEO's Guide to Generative AI for Marketing. There's the website. And this is a survey based on survey analysis of 200 CMOs in North America, typically large organizations. So the average size of the organization of our surveys tends to be somewhere between $20 and $30 billion. So they tend to be CMOs of larger organizations. And these are some of the questions we've asked them in the marketing sphere that I thought you'd be interested in. So what generative AI initiatives are CMOs prioritizing? What aspects of marketing do CMOs believe generative AI will give them more control over? How will marketing KPIs change as generative AI becomes more pervasive across the marketing function? What generative AI model is most likely to become pervasive in marketing? When I say generative AI model, I'm talking about this hybrid approach. Different types of models, different focus on a proprietary model or an ecosystem model or a public model, and the various combinations of that. To what extent is generative AI adoption in marketing being led by IT? What percentage is part of an overall enterprise-wide initiative? Or is marketing going it alone? So that'll give some ideas about the approach to marketing investment in terms strategically. How generative AI is being funded in the marketing investments? Is it coming out of marketing budget, IT budget? How is it? Is it sort of diverted budget from somewhere else, or are CMOs getting new appropriations? What are the biggest risks in adopting generative AI, specifically in marketing? How is generative AI likely to change content creation in marketing, very importantly? And how will the marketing function look 5 years, 10 years ahead? We're trying to it was a multiple choice, but we tried to get some insight into how the marketing function is going to change through the perspective of the CMOs. And so this is just some of the things that we've been asking in this pulse, and I think it's going to provide some really interesting content for us to build something hopefully pretty compelling for the CEO's Guide to Generative AI in marketing at the beginning of December. So, any questions, comments? Yeah.
Curious if there's, especially with C-suite, is there a different reaction from the CIO versus the other C-suite members? If you could speak to maybe the difference.
We haven't looked at the delta, but in terms of the topics that we're investigating, we focused on different roles for different topics, and we did focus a lot on CTO, data officer, and CIO for topics like platform and app mod and tech spend, the data showed with something like this lack of familiarity about ROI and the nuance, so the different investment risk profile and therefore expectation around ROI for different types of investments, that was sort of missing a bit. But in terms of recognition, that this is more than just a capability play with application modernization, the recognition that there is secondary effects on the enterprise, that was more widely understood. What I can tell you is next year, we are putting in place a new CEO study, a new CIO and CTO study. And so we're going to deep dive into these things, but it's probably going to be midway through next year.
We have a question that came in from on the online group.
Yep.
So early on, it was a bit frightening to see the gap between CEOs' belief and everybody else.
We wanted to introduce a little bit of drama to it.
Yeah, we may all recognize that it can be that large, but that was really large. And your response is to produce some things for their education.
Mm-hmm.
So one, can you tell us, is it making a difference? And maybe that's where your next study is. And two, is there something we can do to make a difference in education of the C-suite, so we don't get caught in the, don't worry about it, you got everything you need. Go ahead, right?
Yep. So in terms of education, I think everyone is learning in real time with this stuff, right? CEOs included. And so what we found with the CEO study is that the pressure on CEOs, and we released this in May, which means that we had finished writing it in February, March. And so you need to, in something moving so fast, just recognize the timeline here. But at the time, the pressure on the CEO to react, have a point of view, and demonstrate movement in generative AI was intense. All right, and on the CEO and the board, and we had numbers, in the 90s about the CEOs that felt pressure to actually have a point of view on this stuff. And so a lot of the ambition was probably wishful thinking early on, and there's slowly people have been understanding more, and we're still at that point because the ROI equivalency is a sign of that. And what should we be doing? I think trying to again sort of think around secondary effects. It's very easy to think superficially. Would have been really easy to write a very superficial application modernization CEO action guide, right? But thinking more deeply, so okay, what are the implications of that? What are the implications of that? If there are different models, what are the implications of that? If there are risks, how do I mitigate those? How do I get the benefits with that? And sort of being able to have a point of view build a point of view on that, and help educate other members of the C-suite would be very valuable. Yeah.
Do your surveys break out B2B and B2C? And if so, you share some insights on the differences that you see?
We haven't for this, but we can and sometimes do. What I can say is a lot of our orientation is around B2B, particularly because we are a B2B business, and a lot of our clients are B2B businesses. So this is, and for these important things, there tends, when we have broken it out, the distinctions don't tend to be that great, apart from specific things like customer experience on the B2C side, and there are lags, as you know, between that sort of thing and a B2B. environment. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, it's been great to be here. Thank you for your time. Hopefully it was useful. Thank you.
Okay, so we've come to another round of eating. It's awesome.